All Blacks will be in action for the November internationals in the very near future. 4-test match up against some great Northern Hemisphere sides, and there are still those question marks around the selections. And for that, I have got a very special guest. Some of you guys will recognise him as Inside Rugby with Mark. We're going to be looking through at what is more likely going to be the lineup for Scott Robertson, but maybe whether or not there is a better choice that could be taking place for November as well. But first of all, Mark, thank you very much for coming on the channel. Greatly appreciated. How excited are you for these November internationals?
Hamish, I tell you what, we're so excited over here on the Caribbean Sea that we've kicked up a hurricane in the last few days, mate, and it's storming across Jamaica as we speak. But for all those people in Jamaica, we're with you. It's been devastating across the island today, and a lot of our rugby union friends and family have been affected by this, so shout out to them. But listen, I'm super excited, Hamish. Can't wait, mate. The Irish are in Chicago thinking they're going to kick up a storm, but the All Blacks have a little bit of a secret coming, don't they? We're going to talk about that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, though, the Irish, there's probably a fair enough reason to have that little bit of confidence. Of course, last time they went to this location, they were able to pull off that massive victory back in 2016, New Zealand. They do not want a repeat of that, because the last thing that you can have is a loss in your first game of the November internationals. We're getting closer to that Rugby World Cup draw. You want to get that higher seeding if you can, and also you just want to build the confidence of the players as they move forward. But we will jump straight into it for the lineups, and we will say straight away, this is not what we feel up against the Irish. This is more so in general what New Zealand will more than likely select throughout the whole of November. So starting off with Razor's front row, more than likely we're going to see Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor, and also Fletcher Null. Due to that injury of Tyrell Lomax, seems like Null's the front runner, plus Pasili Otosi, hardly any game time. Tavita Mafaleo the same. So for yourself, if you were looking through at what could be the best possible lineup here for New Zealand in terms of even with a bit of experimentation, is this what it would look like?
Yeah, I think so, Hamish. I think with Fletcher Null playing pretty well this year, I think I'd give him a definite berth in there, starting with Lomax not being available. And I think we pretty much nailed it. One question I had, though, before you start for the rest of the team, is Jason Holland been selected to go on this tour for the All Blacks?
There was the news, wasn't it, that he is going to be hanging up the boots. Well, the thing is, do you say it's hanging up the boots, or do you say hanging up the clipboard for a coach when it comes to an All Black side? But that is now, I want to say, about the third or the fourth guy that has left under the Razor tenure, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit of a pattern starting to appear, so you got to start asking those questions. But I dare not do it on your show because I'll get the fans all riled up. That's for sure. But did he resign, or was he pushed, do you think?
Now you're asking the really controversial questions. I feel like there had to be a bit of mutualness involved in the decision, but it seems like at the moment, Razor's style was not for everyone. And that's the same that can be said about the players as well. There is a certain, I want to say, Crusaders mindset in terms of very much team culture and everything along those lines alongside what is happening on the field. So we don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but we certainly know that it's a very similar lineup most of the time. So whether or not there was a clash there or something else, it's only rumours at this point, isn't it? They need a new guy. So who are you looking at to take Holland's spot?
Well, I'll just say this first of all, because, you know, in this generation of the All Blacks culture you just talked about, we're in a very caring culture. We're always looking after each other. So we're going to look after you, Jason. Don't worry, mate. When you've finished your tenure, we'll be here to take care of you and make sure that culture carries on. Look, I don't know who's going to come in. I have no real ideas. It'd be great to see Wayne Smith back in there, but he's retired, hasn't he? But how about poaching someone from overseas? What's the All Blacks' problem with not having international coaches coming from other parts of the world? Like the Springboks stole our best man, didn't they? And Tony Brown. And what's it cost to get Tony back into New Zealand?
Probably a lot more than it was when he left, I would say, for Tony Brown. He's probably raised the stocks up a little bit. Although the thing is, though, with New Zealand is you're in a situation how they aren't at this stage able to select overseas players from New Zealand. So I feel like there's definitely going to be that barrier of whether or not they'll bring in a few guys. But you look at someone like, you know, Joe Schmidt, how, yes, he was working with Ireland. Of course, he has got that New Zealand connection, but what he's been able to do for Australia, that new look of trying to take a side that were struggling and create a bit of a chance. Now, of course, this is not the head coach role on the line yet, depending on how these November internationals go. But I know it'll be very interesting to see who ends up filling up those gaps for the AB's coaches.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And if we all go back with hindsight, which is a great thing to have, of course, when we're talking about coaching groups and all the rest of it, ideally, I think New Zealand Rugby should have gone with Joe Schmidt as the head coach, had Razor come in as assistant coach, and really teach him the trade through Joe Schmidt doing what he's obviously done with the Wallabies has been phenomenal in the last 12 months, I think, and I talk a lot about that on my show. I've been very impressed with what Joe Schmidt's done. So having him come back into the All Blacks in that capacity would have been the ideal thing. But listen, who do you think? Is there anybody out there that you've been watching in terms of that coaching that you think could come into that role and do what we need? Because let's face it, we need some improvement in our backline in terms of our selections in the backline, creativity, the way they're executing and all the rest of it. So who's the name, Hamish? Who's the one on the top of your tongue, mate?
Well, the thing is, Tony Brown's name's been thrown around a huge amount, but he is currently unavailable. But it will have to be someone who does, I guess, get along with Razor and kind of the attacking plan, because I don't think it's so much as simple as this is your job, you are the attacking coach. I feel like there are a lot of other elements. You've got to be able to work with those other coaches as well. And at the moment for New Zealand, there are times where their backline does look a little bit confused because of that incohesion with the fullback, although it has got better in just recent times. It seems like they're starting to get a little bit more on the same page, which is important, but a lot of questions that need answered before that World Cup. I have a question for yourself as well. I know that we were talking about the All Blacks front row just before, but now we're talking about World Cups and whatnot.
Yeah.
Joe Schmidt, how much of an impact on the Australians is him leaving before that World Cup going to have on their campaign? Les Kiss taking over as well, but do you see him doing the same thing?
Well, listen, I've had some a little bit of inside knowledge come over the weekend from someone, and there's a massive job going on behind the scenes at the moment to try and get Joe Schmidt to change his mind to stay through until the end of the Rugby World Cup. So whether or not that's true, I can't confirm that yet. But there is some hard work being done by all accounts by Rugby Australia to come to an agreement with Joe Schmidt. But let's look at it in its totality, because Joe wanted to move back to New Zealand for family reasons. He's been split from his family for a long time in different roles that he's been doing, and he's had to do it pretty hard. So again, that's why it made a lot of sense to give him an All Black role, didn't it? Really, to get him home to New Zealand and do all that. So look, I think Les Kiss and Joe work really well together. From what I hear, they've got the locker room well and truly sewn up in terms of who they are as people. And as we all know in rugby, that's a really important connector to make sure that your players and your coaches gel together as human beings. And I think that's the biggest thing that Joe and Les Kiss have done in this tenure so far with the Wallabies. They've really brought that unit together. And for me, it all started in that game in Newcastle at McDonald Stadium against the Fijians at the beginning of the year. They won that game in the last minute, and that instilled a lot of belief into this team. And they've really used that belief throughout the season, and it's grown, right? And Les Kiss has been a huge part of that. So yes, while Joe Schmidt gets a lot of plaudits for what he's done with this Wallabies team, let's not underestimate the amount of input that Les Kiss has had in this Wallabies resurgence. And I think that will continue next year after he takes over from Joe, if that happens.
When you look through at that Rugby Championship with the Australians just recently, I feel like, yes, there were a lot of huge moments throughout the Rugby Championship. You had the Springboks beating New Zealand by a massive margin. You had the win for the Kiwis at Eden Park. There was the win for Argentina up against New Zealand in Argentina. But I feel like one of those moments that did stand out seemed to be the mentality of the Wallabies. That particular game where it was the decision, do you take the draw or do you go for the risk and go for the corner? And they were well and truly picking the corner every day of the week. And it just seems like now, the thing is, Australia are dangerous enough as it is. But when they have that mentality of thinking that they can win games, they normally do. And they just don't seem to have that, or at least they didn't have that up until more recently. That maybe not quite as competitive in the Bledisloe as a lot of people wanted to see, but it's still going to be competitive, I think, over the next 2 or so years before the Rugby World Cup. Overall, I feel like there are so many sides at the moment that have a great chance for that 2027 World Cup. Sides like France, who are going a little bit under the radar at the moment. England, they have got a pretty stacked side for their November internationals. And then Los Pumas, side that are fueled by passion, fueled by the desire to be the best, and they have achieved it in football. Can they achieve it in rugby as well in the near future, perhaps?
Hamish, just continuing the part on about Australia there for a second, if I can. I think one of the other things that's been really important with what Joe Schmidt's done within this group, if you have a look at the number of new players he's brought in, and a lot of the players that were selected under Eddie Jones who weren't getting game time, they've been stepped up and now have got a lot of experience. So if you look across the greater group of Joe Schmidt, there's a lot of depth in that group. Unfortunately, what's happened in this year's Rugby Championship in particular, he's had a lot of injuries to deal with. In fact, at one stage, I counted 16 injuries to his key players in that squad, players like Tom Wright that they've lost until next year, right? And then of recent times, the like of Tate McDermott. These guys are really integral parts of this Australian Wallaby team. And when we see the likes of Wright coming back into fullback and Jorgensen going back onto the wing, and, Dylan Peach got his jaw broken, of course, he played brilliantly against the Lions, I thought. So they've got the nucleus of this really good team that's got a lot of depth in it. And what Joe's going to be able to do on this Northern Tour, he's going to be able to give those guys more opportunity against strong opposition. And that's only going to help them going into 2026. So when you see Nick de Crepney coming out as the 92nd captain of the Wallabies last weekend against Japan, that was brilliant for him, right? In terms of getting that opportunity to lead his team, against Japan and starting off a career of leadership that Joe's continuing to build. So that's another area I've been really impressed with the Wallabies so far this year.
And that probably perfectly transitions us straight into the locking duo for New Zealand, where we have got one man out of the 4 available who has more than 10 caps for New Zealand. That being Scott Barrett, more than likely. Scott Robertson will be selecting Barrett as that number 4, with Fabian Holland likely to start as the number 5. For yourself, do you feel that is the strongest combination at this point in time? Or is there a young guy that could possibly go in and start developing at this point?
Well, Hamish, I want to keep throwing curveballs at you, mate, in this conversation. So we can't talk about Scott Barrett in terms of locking without talking about Scott Barrett as the captain. And you've probably heard it so much this year as I have, is whether or not he's the right man. And of course, because Razor's connection with him, we keep seeing Scott Barrett in there as the captain. So the question to me is obviously, would Scott Barrett be in the team if he wasn't the captain? And we saw how the All Blacks went without him. And we've seen how brilliantly Patrick Tuipulotu's played this year when he hasn't been injured. Unfortunately, he's been knocked around again a little bit this year. And we've got the likes of Sam Dowie and Josh Lord coming on. And obviously their youthful experience needs to be broadened more. And hopefully we're going to see this on this tour. But to start off with, yes, against Ireland, I think it is the right pick to go with Barrett and Fabian Holland to start this game. But it's going to tell us a lot as well, because they're going to be up against a couple of good Irishmen in their opposition.
With Scott Barrett as well, at this point in time with the injuries, I do feel like he is the best man for the job in that number 4 jersey. If Tuipulotu was available, maybe it would be a slightly different story, but I've mentioned about it quite a bit recently. Scott Barrett, the player, is different to Scott Barrett, the All Blacks captain. As a player, when he doesn't have that captaincy weight on his shoulders, he's actually, he's one of the better locks coming out of New Zealand. But it's as soon as you stick that captaincy on him, it just seems to make him play almost safe. He knows that he can't afford to get that card because now he's the leader. He's the guy who's got to be out there for the 80 minutes for the ABs. So, without that captaincy pressure, I do think at the moment, number 4-wise, because the thing is, some wanted to see that Fabian Holland, maybe Tupavai combination in the locking duo, and it's something that we did get to see briefly for the Rugby Championship, but just unfortunate timings of injuries of Vai as well as Patrick Tuipulotu. And then we saw Naitoa Akoi as well as Isaiah Waka-Leawiri both removed from the New Zealand 15 squad. Now, initially that seemed like maybe a bit of a cryptic way of putting them into this squad as a bit of injury cover, but by the sounds of it, both are injured. So not a good year to be a lock if you're based in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying that and talking about Patrick Tuipulotu, and in particular, I was thinking about he's such a good impact off the bench, isn't he? Like, he really does make a difference when he comes off the bench. And I think he's found his place there. So for me, the question marks over Scott Barrett Without the captaincy, I agree with you. I think he's a better lock without the pressure of the captaincy, and I really do believe it affects his game from time to time. I think Fabian Holland's not getting enough credit for how brilliant he is in this All Black jersey and in this All Black team. He's come in, he played more minutes than any All Black player up until recently when he got a bit of a rest. But he's been outstanding, hasn't he? He's come in as a world-class lock. He's just embraced the challenge that it takes to be an All Black lock against the big teams in the world. And I think he needs to get a little bit more credit than what he's been getting from the general public and rugby followers around the world.
Oh, he's got that Breakthrough Player of the Year nomination. In my opinion, he should be there in terms of the 4 players that they go with, just because, like you said, such a young player making such a massive impact for a side. Like, you would think when you look through, and this is once again not supposed to be a dig at Scott Barrett, but Fabian Holland's probably the first name you put in that locking duo on your team sheet, even though your captain's the number 4. Yep. So, yeah, I definitely have Holland featuring all throughout the November internationals. I'm just concerned that one day, relatively soon, because of the trend that we've seen with locking injuries, is Holland going to pick up one? He is doing a huge amount of work. He's covering a lot of positions on the field, and also just those dominant tackles. He loves putting in the big hit on the opposition as well. Very similar to what we saw at Wallace Satiti, when we saw the initial injury where Satiti got to come in and then he became the mainstayer in the side. He's a bit more undecided in terms of where in that loose forward trio they should be playing him. He is an 8, but he actually had his best season as a 6. So I guess that brings us straight on to the loose forward trio. More than likely, we are going to see Simon Parker, Ardie Savea, and then Wallace Satiti or Peter Larkai. It's a bit more 50-50, but I'd say they may go with Satiti for this game. So is that your loose forward trio moving forward for New Zealand?
Well, I just want to go back to a name that you mentioned before when we were talking about the locks, and I wanted to ask you the question actually around Tupou Vai. Have we worked out where he's going to sit in this All Black team going forward? Like, if we've got the magic crystal ball there looking at Rugby World Cup 2027, where does Tupou Vai fit in there for the All Blacks?
See, for me, the way that he was playing at 6 was thoroughly impressive. And I feel like having someone like him who can play 6 as well as 5, it sounds bad to say, but it almost makes Samipeni Finau redundant in this All Black squad. You can kind of look at maybe bringing in another specialist lock or someone in a different position in that loose forward trio, but it all depends on what happens from here with Simon Parker in terms of whether or not he continues to develop in that 6 jersey, or whether they do go back to the drawing board and say, look, maybe he is our number 8 instead. Although when he played number 8, didn't even get to pack down at the back of the scrum. I don't know what was going on there, but instead Ardie Savea went in and decided to go back to the number 8 days. But he's just such a versatile player at this stage, Vai, and the fact that he was transitioning pretty seamless between 5 and 6 is great news for the ABs, because there was a while where that was the role that a lot of people wanted to see Scott Barrett playing. So do you think that's ever going to happen again?
Well, I raised his name because I really believe that putting him back at 6 gives you that nice option where you've got another line-out guy, you've got a guy that can cover the locking position if you've got an injury there. And I'd really like to see Simon Parker be given a go at 8 on a permanent basis for a while, because I think longer term, he could be the Jasper Wiese of the All Blacks in that 8 jersey. I really believe that if he's grown into that role, keeping Ardie at 7, of course. So my dream team at the back 3 would be Tupou Vai at 6, Ardie Savea at 7, and putting Simon Parker in there at 8, at least for this Northern Tour, and see how he goes.
So with that injury of Vai, does that mean Satiti's your 6, or are you going Finau in that 6 jersey?
I'd go Finau, unfortunately, with a question mark. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Finau. I just don't think he's delivered enough on the big stage. You know, you watch him at Super Rugby and he's a force de jour, but when he gets in that All Black jersey, like some players do, right? They just take that next step up and they're not so prominent because it's a different game at test level and you're up against the best rugby players in the world. So, yeah, question mark over Finau for me.
Do you think that also slightly comes into play in terms of who else is in that loose forward trio with him? Do you think maybe for Finau's particular style, he hasn't found that trio that works yet?
Yeah, I think so. And when you talked about Wallace Satiti, I'm starting to lean now like I wasn't last year. I'm leaning now towards, like Patrick Tuipulotu's found his way off the bench to be a real impact player. I think Wallace Satiti can be that guy that comes off the bench and be that extraordinary impact player for us as well. So I'm starting to see that kind of, but then who's going to start? That's where the hole appears to be at the moment, right?
And I do think that that's maybe where Peter Larkai, I do really like what he's able to do. And he is another guy that maybe hasn't been given that many chances, but you look at him throughout the NPC seasons, even last year, he was right up there in terms of tackles and carries, and he's always going to give you a huge amount of effort. But again, it's just finding what works in that loose forward trio. And I do think at the moment in our forward pack, that's where the most question marks are. Even though a lot of people are sold on Parker, Savia, Satiti as the trio, I do still think that there's a little bit of fine-tuning that can go on. And those jerseys.
Just on that, though, on the loosies, do you think we're going to see on this Northern Tour, do you think we're going to see quite a lot of rotation from Razor in that 6, 7 and 8 jersey? Do you think he's going to try different combinations, or are we going to be set in concrete again?
The problem that we've got is we've just watched the Rugby Championship, and the only time we saw guys really getting changed was down to injury. So if there's 1 or 2 injuries, then absolutely. But that's the thing. There's just so many decent players that I don't know how they squeeze them in. What do you do with Duplessis Karefi? Specialist 7. Now he's got Savia in his way because he's not taking that starting spot off Savia unless Savia then has to go to number 8 again, like we did see earlier on this year. It makes it very intriguing to know why someone like a Karefi is still there, perhaps for some sort of impact role off of the bench. Those late turnovers, perhaps. But I don't know whether or not we're going to see that massive rotation. Are you the same boat there? How probably more of the same from Razor?
Yeah, what I'm going to propose to you right now, Hamish, is you're going to come on my show after the end of the tour, and we're going to look back on this and go, yeah, we were completely wrong about all of that. And Razor was changing it up every week. But yeah, I don't believe he's going to. I think we're going to see a set pattern there. And I'm with you. I think Duplessis Karefi's in that big question mark hole at the moment. What to do with him, right? We might see Ruben Love come into number 8. Who knows with the Razor, right? He plays him on the wing. So,
Yeah, I guess out of position is a bit of a specialty of this All Blacks backline at the moment. But we move on to that 9 and 10 combination. We talked about fine-tuning of the loose forward trio. Some feel this one pretty much needs a whole new engine put in it because we've got 9 and 10. You've got Cam Roigard. He will be the starting 9 after returning from his injury. That's probably not the jersey that's being debated at the moment, though. I haven't really seen anyone who's disappointed about Roigard being back as the starting 9. But number 10, what we more than likely will see is Beauden Barrett in that 10 jersey for Scott Robertson. And I do think for the best results, you do need to probably split McKenzie and Barrett 50-50. But then what do you do with Ruben Love?
Yep. Well, look, you and I both know there's 2 camps out there in New Zealand rugby fan land. There's the camps that love the Beauden Barrett and Damian McKenzie combination. And then there's the camp that are going, well, where's Ruben Love and why is he not getting a chance at number 10? Well, I sit in the Ruben Love at number 10 camp well and truly. And I'd like to see Roigard and Love operating together because I think that's a combination that people haven't thought about how dynamic that could be against defenses because you've got Cam Roigard that keeps the defenses on their toes with his sniping runs, his brilliant work around the inside channels. And if you've got a young guy like Ruben Love who's got great footwork, he's got a great kick on him as well, I think having that combination would be ideal to go through this Northern Tour. Now, we all know that's not going to happen. So Beauden's going to come in. And I tend to look at the All Blacks at the moment very much with a vision towards 2027. So if we're running out on the field this weekend and we're playing in a quarterfinal or semi-final, what team would I like to see doing that who's got lots of experience against the top teams in the world that I have a lot of confidence in? Beauden Barrett's going to be 36 and a half years old come October in 2027. Damian McKenzie, okay, he's there. He's making some impact off the bench. But if we did get a major injury, then, well, we're all thinking we're going to see Richie Mo'unga come back in next year and he's just going to slot back into it. So for this tour, for me, it's got to be Beauden Barrett starting the games. He's got the talent and also the initiative. What's happening and the struggle for me is what happens outside of him, and I'm sure we're going to get onto that in a minute.
And it's quite interesting how at the moment around the world of rugby, I would say it's about a 50-50 split in terms of top sides, who are going with their veteran 10s and who are going with the new up-and-comers. You look at someone like England using Finn Smith. South Africa, they've got Sasha Feinberg and Gume Zulu now slotting in as a 10. Australia looking more towards that Tom Liner, Tane Edmed kind of combination. And then you've got New Zealand, you've got Scotland, France. Those are the teams that are sticking more so with their foundation and what they have had pretty much throughout that last World Cup and beforehand. Sadly, it gets to a point where they will have to make that transition. And perhaps Beauden Barrett does make it to that next World Cup. But just as a very early prediction, 2031, who do you think is going to be right up there in terms of All Blacks 10 contenders? Do you see Ruben Love still sticking around, or because of the lack of use, do you see him going overseas, making some money elsewhere?
Well, there's a whole lot of different possibilities that might happen between now and then. Of course, New Zealand Rugby might change their policy on overseas players. That could possibly happen. We might see a defection again of some players going overseas, whether it be Ruben Love or even Josh Jacob, if they don't give him a pathway, right? So I think one of the big things that needs to be seen within this All Black group and Jamie Joseph's group, and then the next level down, is there needs to be a pathway that these guys realise that they can build themselves up and have a really good chance of getting game time in the All Black jersey. And I just want to highlight at this stage, Billy Proctor. So if we look back last year with Billy Proctor, and I've been saying a lot on my channel this year, we are 1 year ahead now of where Billy Proctor was last year, but we would have known about Billy Proctor last year if we'd given him more game time last year. And all he did last year was basically sit on the bench, other than that game against Fiji and San Diego, basically, right? So now here we are a year and a half later, and we've still got a question mark over where does Billy Proctor fit into this All Black group going forward? And does he? Does he fit into this All Black group going forward? So we want to make sure we don't have that same problem with the likes of Josh Jacob and those guys coming up, Rihanna and all the others in that 10 jersey that you just spoke about. I like what Argentina are doing. You've got Thomas Albanos and Santiago Carreras, right? Two fantastic 10s. And with Albanos being injured this year, it gave Santiago Carreras an opportunity to stand up. And boy, did he stand up and play well in all those games for the Los Pumas. They've got two really good 10s who are on fire at the moment. And they've got another young guy that they're just bringing through as well. So come 2027, Los Pumas are going to have three really good number 10s who have all got good test experience. And this is the whole discussion we're having about the All Blacks. Where's the transition of those other players? And I thought between Rugby World Cups, that was the time where you transitioned. That was the time where you gave young guys an opportunity to come through.
And the thing with Razor is he has given, in terms of positions in the squad, players have been given those chances in terms of getting selected, but they just haven't been selected in the lineups. I think I saw about how Razor, under his coaching tutelage, we've seen actually a lot more debutants than we saw the years prior for New Zealand. But the problem is, it's all well and good having a debutant, but if he's only going to play, like, for example, Billy Proctor, if he's only going to play 1.5 games throughout a season under the All Blacks, yes, he's going to learn from the training and everything along those lines, but at what stage do you actually pull the trigger and give him the chance? Because now, I mean, we might as well move on to it, that midfield combination. The talks of the 13 at the moment is Quintal Pire being that 13 for November, even though he's only had one game there in the last about, I think it was 50 matches that he's played professionally. But Quintal Pire now 1 match in, got himself a man of the match performance. He's the 13 alongside Geordie Barrett.
Yeah, look, I'm smiling because I read a lot of comments across all the different rugby podcasts after that last New Zealand game, and we've found the solution to our 12 and 13 problem. Geordie Barrett and Quintu Pire, after one game of relatively success against the Aussies, who are wiltering at that stage of their campaign. So I think we need to be careful. I think we need to see consistency. I think we need to have other options available. Does Lester Fainganuku get a chance to show his wares in that position as well? Are there others, again, that haven't been brought into the squad who are playing really good in the midfield? Do we do something really radical, like bring Caleb Clark into 13 and give him a chance there? Could that be another option? It's not going to happen under Razor, though, but maybe the new attack coach will have a foresight on changing around some of the positional plays there.
Because I know that another man that you're quite fond of as a 13 option is actually Leroy Carter, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at, again, if you're looking at my dream team, I would have Geordie Barrett go back to fullback because, he's played there before and he did very well. He's a great defensive player. He's probably one of our best defensive players. Look how much throughout this season he saved us on the try line in terms of, basically try-saving tackles, right, in the last line of defence. He's great under the high ball at the back. He's a tall guy. He's 6'5". He's big as well. He's solid at the back. And he's got a great kick on him as well. He's got that long punt kick, so he can get us out of trouble. And we've had trouble exiting out of our red zone this year. So that's another reason why I would have Jordie Barrett back there to see how he goes. Now, if that happens, of course, Jordan has to go back to the wing. And I've got to say, I've been rather disappointed in Will Jordan. I'm probably his biggest fan and have been for years. But since he's moved to fullback, his try-scoring ratio has dropped significantly. He hasn't looked confident in the last few games, and whether that's a component of what we've been talking about with the belief in the players in general. But I'd like to see Leroy come into 13. Speed, creativity, hooking up with his wingers, having Caleb Clark and Will Jordan on the wing, that would be absolutely dynamic. It kind of feels like a Joseph Suaalii and Max Jorgensen combination on the wings and midfield for Australia. And I'd like to see the Kiwis try that. But again, I'm wishing and hope.
And for that to happen, of course, a lot of parts have to be moved across this All Blacks backline, and it would be the case of just having to fully commit to making that switch. So I'd assume if you're taking Jordie Barrett out of 12, Quintal Pire's going in as your number 12 instead, and then Leroy Carter midfield, or have you got someone else in mind for that 12?
Well, I'd try to Pyro, I'd go Lester Fainganuku in 12.
Oh, okay.
And then bring Leroy into 13. That's what I'd try off. And again, the emphasis here is on to experiment with these positions. And I'm on the side that you just said in terms of it's all very well giving all these guys All Black debuts and caps and all the rest of it. But if they're not being tried out and if we're not trying different things to see how they work out, look what South Africa did in Wellington, right? They brought Damian Willemse into 12 and look at the impact that had on the game. And the guy hadn't been featured there in that position for quite a while, but the biggest game of the year, bouncing back after Eden Park, they put him in at 12 and it just ignited that back line and he was absolutely tremendous. We need that kind of impact from 12. And I just don't think Jordie brings that consistently day in, day out. And that's where we've been struggling. So that's my view on it. What's your view on that 12, 13? Well, what's your view on the whole back line? Because other than Roygaard, I don't think there's anybody that can really say, they're doing the thing at the moment.
Yeah, see, Jordie Barrett, his statistics as well as all of his, I guess you'd say his pros in that position are things that would actually suit very nicely, like you mentioned, for a fullback role in terms of that high ball ability. Normally, you don't see a huge amount of your 12 going for the high ball, but to be fair for the All Blacks, I think they almost try and have him defending a little bit further back. So straight away, there's a little bit of probably indecision about when you're on attack, when you're on defence, and trying to transition smoothly there. Quintal Pire, the way that he played in that man of the match performance, and I know once again it sounds like what most people are saying, how he's now the 13, but I think it's more so he has to start in some regard. Because off of the bench, I feel like that's the perfect role for Lester Fainganuku because you have got that versatility playing in the centres as well as out on the wings. So really alongside, if it is Damian McKenzie, that's perfect. You've got every single backline position covered with the exception of the halfback where you can go with Ratima, or in this case, they've also got Finlay Christie available. But I do think long term, it's a chuckle. That tells you exactly how high Christie ranks. But Cortez Ratima definitely looking more so at the future as well as, you look at someone like a Kyle Preston or even Folau Fakatava as a bit of a backup option from that All Blacks 15 side. But for me, Will Jordan out on the wing, it does make sense that, of course, he would be scoring more tries out on that wing side. And we look at Leroy Carter now, 3 tries from 3 games. I think it just suits the way that the All Blacks play to be able to score tries when you are in that wide channel rather than playing from fullback. Will Jordan hasn't had a huge amount of opportunities on attack ever since transitioning back to 15. But then is that due to not being able to create them, or is that just due to tactics from the All Blacks here?
Yeah, a lot of good things you mentioned there. And first one is I would agree with you on Tupaia and giving him a start at 12 and seeing how that works out regardless of who you put outside of him. With Jordie, did you watch any of his games for Leinster when he was up north?
Yeah, he was phenomenal.
Right. And do you know why he was phenomenal? Because the way of Leinster playing the structured in an attack, right? So you had Sam Prendergast doing exactly what he needs to do at 10 to make Jordie look good and be able to get through gaps and to be more the attacking player. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Jordie's been commanded within this All Black backline to be more defensive than he is attacking. And we've seen that through what you just said about dropping back a little bit, being that defensive guy. That's why he saved tries in the corner for the All Blacks during the season, because he's been having that defensive mindset. So what he did at Leinster was we saw Geordie Barrett being the attacking number 12 again, and he was very, very good. So unless that's the way the All Blacks are going to go, you're not going to optimise the way that Geordie Barrett can play the game, in my opinion. So he should be at fullback.
It's such a tricky switch to make, though, isn't it? Because literally all of this year, Geordie Barrett's been the 12. They haven't really been willing to give too many chances. Tamofi Tavatavanawa, had he not gone back to NPC and got injured, perhaps is he a name that we could have been throwing around throughout this November Internationals tour? Or because of the return of Lester Fainanuku, would we actually have seen Tamofi maybe even drop from the side?
Let's go back and put a caveat over this whole conversation, Hamish, because what's coming to be clearer and clearer for me is, and I want to hear your opinion on this. Scott Robertson's picking a team that he thinks will win games because that's his priority. And it doesn't seem to be a priority of trying out new positional changes, being prepared to lose a game because the New Zealand public's going to be on his back. Mark Robinson's going to be on the phone going, what the hell are you doing? And there's going to be all this pressure from the media. So whereas Russie's got a bit of a gold slate because he's won the World Cups and he can keep playing around with his team and he's got an abundance of talent, I think New Zealand rugby has an abundance of talent. We're not seeing the right guys come through and be given an opportunity in the team. So do you think it's all about for Razor? I'm making selections because I think these guys are going to win us rugby games.
I would say yes, but the biggest problem that they've had just recently is they haven't been winning games. And then you're in that position where you've put all your eggs in the one basket saying this is the best side, or at least the best side, I think, that are going to be able to get the job done. And then when you lose, where do you go? Because then you've always got that chance of, if you do try and experiment, that could be another loss. And then, you don't want those 2 losses in a row because 2 can lead to 3. And then 3 can lead to negotiations of the contract. So I would say for Razor at the moment, this side that we have been talking about, this is about as good as he feels this All Black side can be currently. But the problem is there are other guys, I believe, with more potential that just aren't given that chance. We saw it with Satiti. We've seen it with Fabian Holland. When you give a young guy who's hungry, Leroy Carter, another perfect example. These young guys are going to play for that jersey. And they are going to prove exactly why they should be there, but you have to let them prove it. And if they aren't given that chance, you are just putting out that same side week in, week out, hoping for different results. But you just look at the backline and it just seems like a bit of a muddled mess at the moment. And hopefully, 4 from 4, that is the goal, the Grand Slam for New Zealand up north. But where do they go from here if they lose 2 of them?
Well, here's the thing that I'll just respond to what you just said. And I get a lot of this on my channel from New Zealand supporters saying, no, you can't afford to try the new guys in these sorts of games because they're big test matches and we've got to win them. Who's to say that you put experimental guys in there and you lose games? That's not always the case at all because of the reason you just stated, and it's very clear. And I've played professional sport in my past, and when I got the opportunity to stand up and have my first opportunity, I really took it with open arms, and it was the make or break moment for me. So what you just said was exactly right. If these guys get an opportunity, the chances are probably higher that the All Blacks are going to win, but also win better, right? How long did it take us to get rid of Rico Ioane and Sevu Reece this year after we saw the debaucher games they were playing for the All Blacks? It took us a while, right, to finally realize that these 2 guys are not the answer. But we should have had maybe some other younger guys coming through in the beginning of the season, particularly against France, and giving them an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to play you at home against France. This is your chance. You play well in this, and then you've got a ticket for the rest of the year.
And you look at what the French did in July. Yes, they got a huge amount of criticism, but how many times were they almost able to beat New Zealand with their veteran side? It's one of those ones that you give a young guy that chance, and the passion is always there for these younger players because they know this is their big chance. You look at someone like, you could literally list players from all around the world, young guys for other teams. Ethan Hooker, first one that comes to mind. Give him the chance up against the All Blacks at Eden Park, and as the match wore on, you started to see a little bit more of him, and he started finding his confidence, and then you put him in the game the week after, say, right, we're going to give you another crack. and all of a sudden he just looks like a mainstay in the Springbok side. And then you've still got that other talent to fall back on, just in case. And Aronsa and Mapimpi even still in the mix for South Africa, just never really gets used at this point in time. And now he's suspended, but that's irrelevant in this case. But there's just, it's intriguing. And I feel like, yes, it sounds like we're being pretty critical of this All Black side, but this critique has been adding up for a long period of time for a lot of supporters. And I guess it's just more so if you put it out there, then at least you get the chance to be proven wrong. And I want to be wrong about this. I want to see this New Zealand side be able to perform up against top opposition. They have played recently in the Rugby Championship, whereas this is Ireland's first match of their November as well as pretty much their international season. So that is one big bonus for the Kiwis, but with the fact that they have lost in Chicago before, is that going to play a little bit of a factor on the mentality of the mind of these guys? Because some of these guys were playing in that 2016 game. Look at,
going back to what you said about that French series in New Zealand, look at what Fabien Galtier's done now, right? So he's got a squad of 40 plus players that believe they can beat the All Blacks, right?
Yeah,
and that's a huge thing going into the Rugby World Cup. I think France are going to be one of the most dangerous teams in that Rugby World Cup because of the depth they've got, the talent they've got, and they can match it up against any team playing any kind of rugby. And I think that's going to be really impressive. So that French series in New Zealand did exactly what you said. We had the old stay All Black team in there against these young French guys, and they all came away from that tour going, wow, we're only like 5% away from beating the All Blacks, right? And we've got 2 years to improve on that before the Rugby World Cup. So, yeah, getting back to this tour, you're exactly right. This Irish game, it has so much pressure on it, I think, in terms of what's going to happen over the next month of November, because if the All Blacks lose this game, boy, all those other teams are going to go up a notch and think, right, they're there for the taking, right? Even Wales might think they've got a sniff.
Well, the Welsh game is such an intriguing one because of the fact that that is the game that a lot of people feel will be when Razor experiments. But then if you're experimenting with guys who haven't had any game time beforehand, whereas Wales will be about 2 or 3 games deep in their November internationals by that stage, at the Principality, you'd almost say that Wales will be absolutely more than up for going up against the All Blacks. And Scotland at Murrayfield, that's not an easy game because, when Scotland start flowing, they're a very tough side to beat. So as much as it's nice to think that there are 1 or 2 easy games in this tour, I don't actually think there are. I think that international rugby is that much more competitive than it was about maybe 5 years ago or so. Heading into this next World Cup, there's probably, I want to say at least 5 sides, if not more, who feel like they will have a very good shot of being able to win it. But we will get your prediction as well, not for the World Cup as of yet, still a little way away from that, but for November. New Zealand, they've got their 4 matches. Are you seeing 4 wins? Are you seeing maybe a loss in there? And if so, who is that loss up against?
I just want to go back to Wales. Sorry, I keep saying let's go back.
No, it's all good.
You're raising really good points, and I want to talk about it. So here's my question to you, Hamish, about the Welsh game. If Razor and the crew do bring in some guys to give them an opportunity, it's the last game of the tour. These guys are going to be sitting on the sidelines till next year. What's it going to prove by giving them a game, whether they get some experience for the All Blacks or not, rather than bringing them in earlier, like at the beginning of this tour, and giving them 1 or 2 or even 3 games and building that confidence in those players so that they can go into 2026 then thinking, right, I'm an All Black. I've had experience against some of the top teams in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm way more confident, rather than trundling them out against Wales and maybe winning that game and going, okay, well, I've had 1 test match against Wales and now I've got to sit around until next year. What's the bonus for doing that?
Well, the thing is, with the exception of experience, there actually isn't much of a bonus. But it's the only game that I can really see them fully being willing to take that risk. Because if you do it up against Scotland at Murrayfield, there is actually a chance of losing that game if they don't quite gel early. Plus, it depends on what players you're willing to take out. Because if you're still going to stick with that same foundation of the team and maybe making 1 or 2 switches, then there's a chance that that team will still play like they did the week prior and all you've got is just a young guy in there trying to find his feet and trying to find exactly what the tactics and rhythm are. So you have to be very strategic about who are the guys you're taking out. Like, I feel the locks are probably the better example here. Where do you give Sam Derry the opportunity, or someone like a Josh Lord? Josh Lord's a tricky one for me at the moment. I haven't quite worked out whether or not he is starting material or whether he is, in some regards, this sounds harsh, but maybe even bench material for this current All Black side if they had everyone available.
I'm with you. I'm putting Sam Derry above Josh Lord at the moment. I just think he's got, he's showing more. He's giving me more confidence that he's got what it takes. In terms of this tour, everything's riding on the Irish game. I think the All Blacks are a team of confidence and no confidence at the moment. So I think if they really start off badly against Ireland and don't get a win, and it can be an ugly win, they can get over the line by 1 point or so, but I think that'll give them enough confidence to go on to do well. So really, in all seriousness, I think the game that the All Blacks are probably most likely to lose on this tour is going to be against England.
Okay.
And I think they've got the rest covered, but that's all going to be based on how they perform on Saturday against Ireland, because I think that's going to be the key to their tour. What do you think?
See, I'm actually a little bit in the same boat. I was asked about it on another channel about which game I felt could go the other way, and that English match for me just is a bit of an interesting one at Twickenham as well. There's just something about playing there that can sometimes cause sides to fall apart a little bit. And England, the thing is, England always have some big matches. I think that this one up against Australia this weekend is going to be an absolutely massive one for them. But that game up against the All Blacks, with how close the July internationals were last year, I feel like that's the game that England are really looking at going, if we can beat the All Blacks, not only will it boost them heavily on the world rankings, but it's a statement just before that Rugby World Cup draw going, hey, we're probably going to finish above them in terms of that draw. And also, I don't think they play too often up against the English. So you've got about a year and a half normally, or at least, that you have to wait before you get to find out whether or not you can take them down the next time. So yeah, I think that Twickenham one is such a vital game for both sides in terms of their confidence moving forward, but you can't look past the Irish this weekend. I feel like if you underestimate that Irish team, Kiwis could be in trouble.
So let's talk about let's just talk about England there for a second, because last year, what was it, 2 points the All Blacks won by at Twickenham, right? 2 points. 12 months later, has England progressed and grown and developed more than the All Blacks in 12 months? Or are the All Blacks at the same level they were 12 months ago? Or are they even a bit worse than what we saw at Twickenham last year?
What I might quickly do, hopefully it will be quick as well, I'm going to get up that lineup that took on the English last year for New Zealand and just see the differences compared to
good idea
what we would see this year. But I feel like New Zealand, this squad has not changed a massive amount other than maybe injury returns and a couple little reshuffles. So yeah, 24 points to 22 was the score. New Zealand's lineup: Tamaiti Williams, Cody Taylor, Tyrell Lomax. So Lomax, of course, would be in there if he wasn't injured. Williams, he was getting the pick over, I think De Groot was injured when I look at that, because Ofa Tuangafasi was the man making his way off of the bench. Locking duo, Barrett and Tupavai. Loose forward trio, Satiti playing 6, Savia playing 8, Sam Cane as the number 7. So you'd have to say now we have seen quite a bit of a switch here in the New Zealand loose forward trio, but it's the question of, is it for the better at the moment, or do they still need a little bit more adjustment? It was Roigard off the bench with Ratama starting alongside Bowden Barrett in that combination. Geordie Barrett, Rico Ioane as the midfield, as it was every game. And then Caleb Clark, Mark Talia, and Will Jordan. So not actually that different in terms of the back three, with Talia pretty much swapping out for Carter more than likely for this game.
And I think the English team, particularly in their backline, have really evolved in the last 12 months. And I think they've got, dare I say it, a better attacking option available to them with some big guys, some fast guys. And I just think they're gelling better as well. I watched the games in Argentina, and granted, it was almost an England B team that went down to Argentina. But again, Steve Borthwick is developing good depth in that squad. And that's going to be something he's going to be able to call on across this autumn series. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they go against Australia, as you said, because that's going to be a warm-up game, obviously, for the All Black team, and get some of those English players either cemented in their position to play the All Blacks, or maybe put a question mark for him to try a couple other new players. So I think the England game's a huge one for the All Blacks as well.
Yeah, and definitely with it being midway through the tour as well. So if they've got the 2 wins up till that point, of course, that is where you can either hit your massive roadblock, or that's where you can just kind of, I'd like to call it smooth sailing, but once again, not underestimating this Welsh side. But, you know, if you're 3-0 going into that last game, you've done your job for the tour, you've proven what you've needed to. But then, you know, imagine sitting 1-2 going into that last Welsh game, you're playing off to make it 50-50. For the end of the tour. So nervous times.
It's going to be massive. And I say regularly on my channel, and I've said this for the last 18 months, that any of the teams in the top 10 on any given day can beat the others. It all determines on obviously some injuries, weather conditions, selections, and a little bit of individual brilliance from one player during a game. And we've seen that quite regularly throughout the season. I think we've seen those star qualities come through with Sasha Feinberg and Gomazulu. We saw Santiago Carrera scoring all of Argentina's points against Australia, over 30 points. So he was individually brilliant in that game. We have seen it from the All Blacks on different occasions, I think, in terms of some outstanding performances, but we haven't seen it from an attacking point of view. And I think that's where we've been really missing it. So I think put all those factors together, that's what makes this Northern Tour really exciting. And don't write off Scotland, as you said. They're going to be really believing this year for sure.
So I'm going to quickly ask you this question before we wrap it up. Who is the player in that back line that's going to bring you that attacking brilliance for New Zealand in November?
It'll be Will Jordan if he plays on the wing.
So, okay, I'll ask it again. Since that's not happening...
Well, I'll go with Cam Roigard because he's, I think he brings confidence now to that back line. I think now that he's back in there, he causes a lot of problems for the defensive line. I like the way that he's constantly asking questions of the defense, and that helps us outside backs have a little bit more time. And I think that's what this All Black back line needs. It needs a little bit more time.
And
what about you, Hamish? What about you, Hamish? Come on.
I didn't think you were throwing it back, but no. See, I want to say Leroy Carter, but then at the same time, I think November has to be the time for Caleb Clark out on that left wing side, because out of all of the players in this backline, you'd argue at the moment with the fact that they have got, theoretically, Rico Ioane there, they've got Lester Whainaunuku, who did have a pretty solid game out on that left wing side up against Australia. Clark is... bad as it sounds, he hasn't done that much throughout this year. In Super Rugby, he wasn't able to really prove himself, whereas the year prior, he had some of the most outstanding stats that we've seen in quite some time in Super Rugby. For the All Blacks, he just needs to find that rhythm, because the thing is, he has got a huge amount of talent, and if given space, we saw it in that game that he played in before the ankle injury, he can really do a lot, and it's that aerial ability as well. The fact that there was so long where New Zealand couldn't find a way of retaining a ball or even getting the opposition to not retain theirs, I think that Caleb Clark just really solidifies a little bit out on that left wing side. And I also, in the original All Blacks lineup that I decided to select on my original All Black squad, I did say that Caleb Clark, by the end of the year, if he's consistently selected, would have 6 tries, and he's only got the 1, so I need like 5 tries throughout November, or else I'm really wrong. So
you've got a personal investment in this one. Look, I'm going to change my pick. I'm going to make it Leroy Carter after what you just said. I agree. I think he's had an outstanding year. He's scoring tries in the middle of the forward pack when they're doing pick and goes for the try line, and then he's scoring tries out wide. I think his hungriness is what I'm really loving about Leroy Carter, and it goes back to what we've been talking about throughout the whole podcast today, is that when you give these young guys an opportunity to prove themselves, if they're hungry enough to come in, they'll deliver, and that's exactly what Leroy Carter. So he's going to be my player of the series for the All Blacks. There you go.
Is he going to be one of the breakthrough player nominations from World Rugby as well while we're at it?
Well, yeah, of course he's a back. World Rugby never back forwards, right? So
yeah, I think we learned that with Ox and Shad, didn't we?
Yeah.
With how well he played.
Yeah. So, he might be. He might be, and he probably deserves it. He's scoring a try in every game for the All Blacks at the moment, right?
Yeah, 3 from 3, which is pretty similar to what we saw from Will Jordan right at the start of his All Blacks career.
But he's looked one of the most dangerous All Blacks on the field in every game that he's played, and that's all you can say about it, right? He really looks dangerous. It's a bit like Max Jorgensen, right? Every time Max Jorgensen gets the ball, you think, okay, this guy's going to score a try.
It's just that young, aggressive mentality of wanting to be there and wanting to show how good you are, because, chances are limited. And let's just say, for instance, Leroy Carter, had he played poorly in his first 2 games, he probably wouldn't have even been in the squad. Now, at this stage, they would have gone back to, they do have Sever Reece in the environment already. So, they would have been able to find someone else. David Harvey probably would have been chucked back in for good measure.
Okay, so I know you want to end the show. So why don't you give me your 2 most disappointing selections in this All Black tour group? Who do you think just should not have gone on this tour?
That's when we just cut the video there, isn't it? But no, I would say, for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense having Rieko Ioane up there, other than for a little bit of injury cover on that left wing side, because he is going to Leinster for a bit of a sabbatical, so he's heading away anyway. But I would say it honestly could be Rieko Ioane, Sever Reece in this scenario. I would also argue that Anton Leonard-Brown, the fact that we just aren't really seeing him play for the All Blacks at the moment, plus they've already got an acre of talent when it comes to the midfield combination. So don't get me wrong, Leonard-Brown has had his day in the All Blacks kit, but now it just seems like he's kind of hanging on for dear life, trying to stay there in the environment, whereas you could have looked at chucking in a breakthrough guy like a Fihi Finiar-Norfo, give him an opportunity, or, had he not gone to Japan, Peter Umaga-Jensen, someone like that.
Yep.
And just, see what happens. Give them a chance. Even chucking someone like a Braden Enor at the moment back in the midfield, I think, wouldn't be a terrible idea. He's been solid throughout the NPC.
Yep. Look, I agree with you. And I think, I also want to put a caveat on that and just say that these guys like Rieko Ioane and Anton Leonard-Brown, they've served New Zealand rugby really well. They've been extraordinary players over the years, so there's no slight on their performances in the past. We're talking about, and we're being critical, if you like, of the current state of All Black rugby and where All Black rugby needs to be for 2027. And for me, they don't fit into that picture, and that's where I'm coming from when I make that comment in regards to those two. So yeah, I'd put 3 into 2. Hamish, I'd have Sevu Reece, Anton Leonard-Brown, and Rieko Ioane not going on this tour.
Any forwards that you'd say, maybe a Jacobson or someone like that, or is that just you got him there for that versatility, and he is a hard man at the end of the day, isn't he? He'll go out there up against a physical pack and probably take a concussion on the chin for the sake of the team.
Yeah, but what I want to see as a result of him getting this opportunity is by the end of the tour that we've really either got it cemented in our head that, it's the right guy or not the right guy, and stop wasting our time going forward with some of these players.
Yeah, if he doesn't play any minutes throughout November, or maybe one game if he's lucky, you would have to wonder whether or not they could have looked at another one of those younger guys. You've got Leo Willie, for instance. What did he do wrong up against France that got him dropped from the whole side, other than be available when someone else came back from injury?
Yeah.
Is he the guy that they should have been trying to develop throughout this time? Or maybe someone like it's a bit
Lucas Casey.
Early. I was about to say Lucas Casey, but then I thought, well, he isn't even in the All Blacks 15, so they've got options.
I was having a chat with a friend of mine the other night, and he was about 3 or 4 beers deep in the conversation. So I took the opportunity to say, Lucas Casey at 12, try him there. His footwork is brilliant. His ball handling skills is brilliant. If you had Roygaard, Ruben Love, and then Lucas Casey at 12, bring Leroy Carter into 13, what a backline that would be potentially for the All Blacks, right?
It would be certainly different, I guess you could say. But then we have seen, someone like an Andre Esterhuizen at the moment. He is hybrid stage. Mm-hmm. He's picked as the number 20 going into the game this weekend up against the Japanese. And it's a bit similar to someone like an Ollie Mathis, isn't it? How he started out as a bit more of a forward, and then they found out that he can play as a back. And
Quagga Smith.
Quagga Smith, perfect example. It's all those guys from the sevens normally, isn't it, who managed to play in about 57 different positions. Leroy Carter being one of them too. But
Esgrove for Argentina is another one.
Yep. Big solid man. See, he could slot into a forward pack without too much trouble, couldn't he? If he really wanted to. Juan Martin Gonzalez for the Argentines. Stick him in a back line, he'd probably do well.
Fantastic player, yeah, one of my favourites. So I think, I guess we're summarising it like this, Hamish. No creativity coming up on the Northern Tour. It's going to be a very conservative approach. Injuries will dictate selections for the whole tour, no question about it. And we'll see, what do they call them? The impact players, the bench players, right? Whether or not they make any impact at all when they come on in the last 30 minutes of the game.
Last 30? Some of them get like 2.
Well, if you're Ruben Love, you'll get two minutes, yeah. So, but seriously, that's been another weakness, in my opinion, of the All Blacks, right? In the last 12 months, has been their ability to really come on. We used to be the world's most outstanding team in finishing games off, right? Like in the last 20 minutes, we were able to run away from teams on the scoreboard. Those days are gone. We're now holding on. If we're in the lead, we're holding on to try and win a game. And we look fragile in doing it. We look disillusioned when our bench comes on at times in terms of decision-making, wasteful kicking. That's been another thing we haven't even touched on today. Our kicking at times in general play has been deplorable throughout the year. And that's something that needs to be tidied up. And it's not coming from the current group of players as far as I can see. And I watched Josh Jacob for Taranaki and see how the way that he controls the game, his game management skills are phenomenal. And it doesn't matter what level of rugby you're playing, because everybody's going to say, yeah, but that's NPC and all the rest of it, But the fact is, he's got that kind of brain. He's got that intelligence at number 10. And I can't remember the game I watched. I think it was against Bay of Plenty, where he got 3 tries. Each one of those tries was just magnificently orchestrated through game management, right? He put the guy through a gap. He was there as a support player, got the ball back and scored. The other one, he kicked across the field, a cross-field kick. It's just extraordinary. And that's something we're really missing, because one of the weaknesses, I think, of Beauden Barrett is he's making the wrong decisions at the wrong times quite a lot of the time when it comes to kicking, passing and running himself. And anyway, we could go on for another 2 hours about this. But
then that's the thing with the bench. You look at one of those recent games, the All Blacks had 5 fullbacks in their back line.
Right.
So that's always going to make it a little bit tricky to find that nice balance of who's defending, who's attacking. But less fullbacks, more specialists in positions, I think, is what we wouldn't mind seeing.
That sums it up.
November.
I think that sums it up, right? Getting the right people who are performing in the right positions.
Yeah.
That's it. The All Blacks are able to do that and build on that in 2 years' time, then we've got a great chance of winning the Rugby World Cup. But if they don't do that, then we might be having trouble getting out of the semi-final or getting to the semi-final.
More teams, of course. So a few more easier rounds in the early stages, which is where you do need your depth. You need to test out those guys and keep that squad rotating.
Yep.
So that you are fresh for those big games. But nonetheless, I will be honest, I did not expect to be talking for over an hour about this All Black side, but it's been thoroughly enjoyable. So once again, a massive thank you for Mark coming on the channel. Anyone who doesn't know who this man is, he is the guy from Cancun, as I've heard him referred to many times. Be sure to check out his channel. The link will be in the description, but it is Inside Rugby with Mark. He has got a huge amount of rugby knowledge and also a very big project in the works at the moment as well. But nonetheless, we do thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you all for the next one.
Thanks, Haven.